Jodi Jones grew up in the East Houses and Mayfield areas of Dalkeith, just on the outskirts of Edinburgh. Jodi, the youngest of three, was raised by her parents Judith and Jimmy in their family home in Mayfield up until July of 1998, when her father tragically committed suicide while Jodi holidayed with her aunts. After this, Judith and the children moved to a new address in East Houses, around 10 or 15 minute walk or a 5-minute drive away, to try and start afresh and attempt perhaps to escape the daily reliving of their grief while remaining close to their family. Jodi attended St David's, a Catholic school in Dalkeith, where she met Luke, both identifying with the alternative scene and bonding over mutual tastes, one such example being the band Nirvana, with the Nevermind single Come As You Are being played at Jodi's funeral, and an inscription from frontman Kurt Cobain found within an empty knife pouch belonging to Mitchell. Quote, "The finest day I ever had was when tomorrow never came." This taken from Cobain's journal itself. Although Jodi Jones lost her life on the 30th of June 2003, it would not be until the 21st of January 2005 that Luke Mitchell would be found guilty of her murder. Questioned at the time of the discovery and his house searched, Luke was further detained and released on the 14th of August that year, before being arrested and charged on the 14th of April 2004. Luke was charged with Jodi's murder as well as other crimes, including knife possession and dealing cannabis. Luke would argue a defence of alibi and incrimination. However, the evidence would support neither of these points in the eyes of the jury. The jury would hear that on the day of the 30th, Judith gathered Jodi and her siblings Janine and Joseph to make them aware she would be attending her late husband Jimmy's grave less, perhaps a further step in her progress of grief. The family listened to a song by Jimmy's favourite artist Rod Stewart before Judith advised Jodi, although she had been previously grounded, she would let her out to see her friends. The jury would further hear that as Jodi's phone was broken, she would use her mum's to text Luke at 4:35 p.m. and arrange to meet, with Luke replying a minute later. Jodi replied at 4:38 before heading upstairs to get ready and leaving the household at 4:50 p.m. Jodi and Luke often met on Ronsdyke Path, a woodland shortcut between Jodi's house in East Houses and Luke's in Newbattle. The path, believed to take around 15 minutes, approximately, to walk. Separating the dirt path from the woodland area is a large dilapidated wall, which during the case itself would be replicated in court as a visual aid for the jury. Jodi's mother, Judith, had instructed both of them that Jodi was not to walk the path alone. Indeed, Jodi's schoolmate, Rachel Quinn, while giving evidence, stated that Jodi had made her aware Luke was to meet her at the east end of the path, by Jodi's house, or halfway along Ronsdyke itself, at minimum. On the face of it, this wouldn't have appeared to be an issue, as Jodi had advised her mum that her and Luke would be, quote, mucking about up here, meaning she intended to stay close to the family home. Andrina Bryson gave evidence that around 4:54 she saw a male and a female at the east end of the path. The female with dark hair, wearing it in a ponytail, with dark navy blue hoodie and similar coloured trousers. The male, with long, messy, sandy brown hair, was wearing a large green parka-style jacket with the collar up. Police used Bryson's shop receipts to place her on the road at that time also. Two local youths known to the family also testified to being in the area where Jodi's body was found, between 5 o'clock and 5:15, although they would further state that they did not see Luke or Jodi. John Ferris and Gordon Dickey admitted to driving up and down the path on a moped, but both stated they did not go over the wall, with no evidence to show the statement was untrue. A further witness, cyclist Leonard Kelly, gave evidence that he was on the path around 5:15, and further commented he had been startled by a strangling noise, saying it had sounded like someone had someone in a headlock. Mr. Kelly said that he did not investigate as it went quiet, and he also testified that he could hear the moped being used by Ferris and Dickey, stating it sounded like it was some distance away at the time. At 5:40, Mitchell made a call and spoke to Judith's partner, Alan Evans. Mr. Evans made him aware Jodi had left to meet him already. After this call, Luke would not attempt to contact Jodi again, and when questioned later, stated he could not remember if he had tried to confirm whether they were still meeting up. A little after the time of the call, another witness, Lorraine Fleming, testifies she also spotted Mitchell leaning against the gate at the end of the west end of the path around 5:50. Miss Fleming says she felt he was acting suspiciously as he kept his head down and commented to the driver of the car she was in that, quote, "He looks like he's been up to no good." Again, the description given by Mrs. Fleming was that of a young boy in dark clothing and wearing a green jacket. Between 5 to 10 minutes later, Luke was again seen by a driveway close to his house in New Battle Abbey Crescent. Andrew Holborn, unsure who Luke was informed by his friends Dean Houston and Grant Elliott. Houston himself would sometimes cycle to school with Mitchell. Grant Elliott would also further testify that Luke was still standing in the same spot when he made his return journey home around 20 to 30 minutes later. Indeed, Carol Heatle would state that she witnessed Luke in this driveway, testifying she slowed down to see what he was up to, as he seemed to have tried to step out of her way when he spotted the car, this around 5 minutes past 6. Mitchell, however, argued he was at home at the time of the murder. During questioning by the police, Luke informed them he had returned home after school and had been making dinner when his mum Corinne returned home at her usual time of 5:15. Luke, however, would not take the stand during the proceedings. The prosecution would instead use Luke's previous police interviews to show the inaccuracies in alibi, as well as lies told by him, his mum, and older brother Shane, with his brother putting the final nail in the coffin by failing to corroborate Luke's version of events. Instead, it would be left to Luke's mum, Corinne, to take the stand and share his side of the story. Corinne would state that she returned straight home from work at 5:15. Luke, at the time, again making dinner, asked if some of the veg could be edible, and Corinne made a comment to the court that she hadn't been to the shop, so they had very little in the house. Corinne would go on to say that she would eat dinner in the back garden, while Shane ate his upstairs before leaving around 5:30. Luke would leave the house at 20 to 6. The same time, Mitchell would call Jodi's house and be informed she had already left, the previous call that he had forgot he had made when questioned. Mitchell would go on to claim during questioning he would wait for Jodi at the west end of Roansdyke, but would not step foot on the path itself. He would instead wait there until 6:32, where he would contact his friends David High, ironically arranging to meet and smoke cannabis. The boys would meet up at 7 p.m. at New Battle Abbey College with another youth, David Tulloch. Both Davids would give testimony that they left Luke at 9 p.m. to go home. Luke's neighbours would witness him returning to the house just after 10 p.m, although Corinne would say that this was wrong, and he was home just before 9 p.m, before the Davids even left his company. At 10 p.m, the time of Jodi's curfew, she hadn't returned, meaning her mum Judith texted Luke's phone asking her to come home and informing her she would again be grounded for being late. At 10:43, Luke would call back to say he hadn't seen Jodi all day. Judith would testify that after hanging up, she felt something was wrong. She then called Luke back to confirm he wasn't covering for her, before calling her mother Alice, as well as the police and Jodi's friends. Judith made 4 more calls to Luke between 10:49 and 11:17, who advised he was on Roansdyke Path with his dog Mia, looking for Jodi. Jodi's big sister Janine, her fiancé Stephen Kelly, and Gran Alice Walker set off from their home in Mayfield after being contacted by Judith. Looking to search the path also, they met Luke with his dog, and Luke, already having searched up to that point, agreed to search the area again with the group. This time, however, Luke would climb over the wall separating the path and woodland area, claiming his dog Mia had jumped up at the wall a couple of feet after the gap he used to access the woods. The rest of the search party would testify, however, that Luke did not pass the gap at all. The court heard that Luke instead handed his dog's lead to Alice Walker and scaled the wall as soon as he reached the gap. It was then that Luke signalled to the rest of the group he had found something. Stephen Kelly also made his way over the wall. Travelling down the wall and peering round a tree, Mr. Kelly identified Jodi. Testifying in court, Mr. Kelly spoke of the shock and the feeling that he wanted to vomit coming back over the wall, stating he could not go into great detail at the fear of upsetting the family. Alice Walker, Jodi's gran, gave evidence that when she went over the wall, she found Jodi naked and without her glasses on. Walker described her as looking up at the sky, with the bottom part twisted. Walker admitted to touching Jodi on the forehead and noticed the wound on her neck. Jodi's throat had been slit, with experts testifying her jugular vein had been cut right through, as well as the main artery being cut 7/8 of the way through, with further damage to the main nerve. The jury heard there were a minimum of 12 cuts to the neck, and a hole had been cut in her windpipe. These wounds, believed to have been received while Jodi was kneeling due to the blood spray on the wall. The court further heard there were injuries to her abdomen, arm, breast, forehead, with cuts to her ear and eyelids. Jodi's cheek was also cut to the depth of around an inch, with further injuries to her tonsils. Experts testify these injuries were caused by a stout, sharp knife, and when shown a folding knife, agreed it would match the suspected weapon. The pathologist would go on to explain the cuts made post-mortem were careful and deliberate, stating, quote, "At the time, he or she knows exactly what they are up to." Although there were differences in staging, the professor would be asked about similarities with the Black Dahlia murder. Indeed, although Jodi had not been cut in half or had her breast tissue removed, there were several similar injuries in both cases. Luke would go on to purchase a Marilyn Manson CD using artwork depicting this. Manson had been using the case to hype his album The Golden Age of Grotesque for some time before Jodi's death and the album's launch. Jodi would also suffer injuries to the head, although there was no clarity as to what may have caused this, or if they were used to help incapacitate her or carried out post-mortem. After the discovery of Jodi's body, members of the search party had their belongings taken for forensic testing, while Luke was taken to Dalkeith police station for questioning. The court would hear that around 12:30 AM, Luke would delete information from his phone, such as texts and call data. The Mitchells' home would be searched on the 4th of July. PC Anita Dow described Mitchell's bedroom as being in a state of, quote, disgusting, smelly squalor. Luke appeared to be sleeping on the floor. With his bed cluttered, police found cannabis, scales, a multi-tool, along with a receipt for a skunting knife and an empty knife pouch. Police would also find 20 bottles of Mitchell's own urine hidden within drawers, under his bed, and some wrapped in his own clothes. DNA from Luke and Stephen Kelly was found at the scene. Kelly's on a t-shirt Jodi had been wearing, believed to have been borrowed from her sister Janine. Stephen would also have a confirmed alibi for that night Jodi was murdered. Luke's, only a partial match, could not be used as evidence of murder, as it was accepted that the two were in a sexual relationship, and this would be expected. DNA also, itself, being considered circumstantial evidence under Scottish law. It would instead be up to the prosecution to prove through forensic evidence, placing him at the scene during the time, should they want to rely on the DNA route. This would really be achieved with either a weapon or Luke's bloodied clothing. Both avenues ultimately led to dead ends, as neither the knife nor the parka jacket witnesses testified to seeing were ever found. During her testimony, Corinne Mitchell was questioned on purchasing a replacement for both missing items in the alternative clothing shop Flip in South Clark Street in Edinburgh. Mitchell had previously stated Luke hadn't owned such a jacket, saying that she had bought him it because it was, quote, fashionable. However, up to 7 different witnesses would testify he did own such a jacket. One such witness, a teacher at Mitchell's high school, stating he looked like a, quote, hooded monk, Further photographs showing Luke wearing a parka-style jacket at a concert weeks before Jodi died, and CCTV footage from inside the school itself showing Luke wearing the jacket showed this to be untrue. Corinne was further questioned on her version of events that evening and the time frame she'd given police. With the use of local CCTV, police were able to establish that Mitchell had taken a completely different route home than the one she had stated, and indeed had made a stop at a local supermarket on her way home. This meant that Corinne could not have returned home until at least 5:27, 3 minutes before Shane left, and only 13 minutes before Luke would also leave. The prosecution pointed out this was in no way enough time to reflect Miss Mitchell's version of events. Corinne would also testify when Jodi did not meet Luke, he would call her at 6:40 to say that if she turned up, to make her way to the college where he would be with High and Tulloch. Several neighbours reported 2 separate fires at the Mitchells' back garden that evening. The first at 6:30, just before Luke made contact with High, and the second around 10 p.m, just as neighbours witnessed Mitchell returning home. The burner after testing showed unidentified fibres, but no evidence linking Mitchell to the crime scene itself. Although parts of the burner appeared to be missing, there was again no proof as to when this might have been removed. Initially, Corinne denied the fires, but during her second day on the stand, she believed that she may have been burning pampas grass. All that remained of the suspected weapon was the pouch itself, containing the quote from Kurt Cobain. The wooden-handled Jack Pike skunting blade's existence was initially denied by Luke's mum, up until the police found a catalogue receipt in Luke's room during one of their searches. Corinne would then say it may have been bought for a camping trip, although Luke would state during interviews with police it was for fishing. Indeed, Corinne's denial of the ownership of the knife would be further called into doubt when several witnesses took the stand and confirmed Luke often carried such a blade. Army Cadet leader Matthew Maraska spoke about an incident where Luke had been carrying the knife while attending the group. Mr. Maraska informed the rest of the attendees he did not want to see such implements at all and questioned the legality of it, describing a 6 or 7 inch lock blade made for one purpose: killing. Several of Luke's friends would testify to him regularly carrying the wooden-handled blade. Alexander Hamilton spoke of Luke producing the knife during a technological studies class, as well as Laura Whiteman, who had stated that she had seen Luke with the knife and pouch while at Pizza Hut with him and Jodi. Keith Campbell told the court Mitchell carried the knife, quote, everywhere, saying he had seen the leather pouch and identified Luke's Swiss Army-style knife, a lock knife, as well as a further thin-bladed penknife. Luke would also spend a lot of time in Livingston with his father Philip after his parents had separated when he was 10 years old. Several of Luke's friends from the area would again testify to Luke carrying these blades. Both Robert Gilhooly and Ashley Coots confirmed furthermore that this was common practice for Mitchell. The court would also hear of an incident at the property his father lived where a 12-year-old Luke climbed on top of an 11-year-old girl staying as a guest and held a knife to her throat, demanding she kissed him. It would come to light after the trial that a similar incident was perhaps one of the reasons Mitchell would stop attending cadets. Caravan Null spoke of an evening when, while wearing a balaclava, Mitchell had grabbed her from behind and with a knife to her neck stated she would die if she moved an inch. Luke would claim this was merely a prank, this incident believed to be only a month before Jodi's murder. Some of the most damning evidence relating to this came from David High, who confirmed he had seen Luke with the knife pouch the night of Jodi's death, while smoking cannabis. High further stated that Luke was not very chatty that evening, and when asked where Jodi was, he said that she wouldn't be coming out that evening, an odd statement given he had just instructed his mum to tell Jodi to meet them. Luke in the past had joked about killing someone. Michelle Tierney spoke of a conversation where Luke stated, quote, he could just imagine getting stoned and killing someone and how funny it would be. It would also come to light that he had commented on how easy it would be to stab someone in the eye with a corkscrew. There could be no doubt in the jury's mind. Mitchell himself stated in an essay, quote, just because I'm more violent than others and cut myself, does that justify some pompous git of a teacher to refer me to a psychiatrist? Mitchell's outlook would see him referred to a school psychologist at the age of 11. while attending Kings Park Primary in Dalkeith. This after his attitude shown during a fight with another pupil on the school grounds. Luke would take the unusual route of going from Kings Park Primary to St David's High instead of the usual common Dalkeith High, meaning a fresh start with new peers. This was monitored by the psychologist and initially was positive. However, in 2003, Luke would be referred to the guidance teacher after essays written in English class had worried his teacher Geraldine Mackey. Mackey said, quote, "Some of the content I found quite worrying and quite unusual for a pupil," going on to say that this was the first time she'd ever had to do this with a pupil's work. In it, the essay where pupils were tasked with imagining the end of the world. Luke spoke about his annoyance he felt with the followers of God, saying they were a, quote, "bunch of fools," as well as accusing them of, quote, "annoying others who want nothing to do with them." In this essay, Luke would go on to state that these people, quote, "need satanic people like me," and claimed, quote, "once you shake hands with the devil, then you have truly experienced life." Some of Luke's jotters were shown in court, talking about depression as well as Satan, and filled with expletives such as, quote, "evil is the way, Satan lives, and fuck the world." Corinne Mitchell has later stated that when she was called into school to discuss this, she didn't understand why, as she felt it was a normal teenage rant, in her opinion. Luke's history of violence wouldn't be confined to these examples, however, with classmate Ben Soule recalling 2 incidents involving Mitchell. One involving Luke assaulting someone in the school canteen, and another where Luke smashed up his bike after an argument. Luke, as previously stated, committed self-harm. Michelle Tierney spoke of Mitchell stubbing out cigarettes on his arm, and Luke had once also scored 666 into his arm for a dare. The prosecution would show the Mitchell household was somewhat unorthodox. Witnesses testified to regularly smoking cannabis in the house with Luke and his mum. Although there was nothing sexual in nature between Luke and Corinne, the relationship was described as odd by some, with Luke seen as somewhat of the man of the house after the separation of his parents. The waters would be further muddied in public perception when it came to light that Corinne was sharing a room with Luke when he was arrested. This, however, was a room with bunk beds, and it turned out it was merely Corinne being present in the room during their arrest, smoking cannabis with Luke. The dynamic between the two would be called into question more when Corinne took the stand, as it came to light she helped Luke get an underage tattoo with the use of fake ID. Mitchell said it was due to Luke going through a hard time and needing to commemorate it, while the prosecution would argue it showed a lack of proper parental guidance, structure, and the following of the law. After all, false ID, drug dealing, and knife possession did show regular disregard for rules. Jodi had commented to friend Kirsten Ford that she, quote, found it weird Luke had a lot of knives, and further commented she knew Corinne was smoking a lot of cannabis and described her as, quote, mad as a hatter. Mitchell appeared to be very sexually active for his age. Not only was Luke in a relationship with Jodi, but he was also dating Kimberly Thompson from Kenmore in Perthshire. Jodi at one point believed Luke was cheating on her when confiding with best friend Kirsten Ford. Mitchell had met Thompson in 2002 and started dating, Thompson describing them in court as, quote, boyfriend and girlfriend. Thompson had visited both Luke's dad's house in Livingston as well as his mother's property, staying over from Boxing Day until just after New Year. Those who attended court, as well as Jodi's old family and Luke's friends, described Mrs. Thompson as Jodi's lookalike, with Robert Gurhooley even going as far as to say when Luke had showed him a photo of Thompson, he thought it was actually Jodi. Mitchell's claims about his drugs habit would be questioned, with Luke claiming to smoke 40 joints a day, or 300 a week. Detective Constable Brian Melrose stated he hadn't heard of anyone using such a large amount, with Mitchell going on to state this amount would double after Jodi's death. Melrose stated, quote, even as an adult it would be difficult to function on that amount. Given Mitchell was found with such a large amount of cannabis and faced charges of dealing the drug, this claim may have been to cover for having such large amounts of the drug in his possession.
Luke's behaviour was also questioned in relation to meeting up with his friends after Jodi had failed to meet him. Luke had called High a second time and instructed him to meet him at the college instead of his house, yet Luke had not made any other attempts to contact Jodi. When questioned why his suspicion hadn't been raised, he said he thought that she'd perhaps gone with someone else, or maybe been grounded again by her mum. It would also be highlighted during proceedings that Luke had made a call to Jodi's house before speaking to Alan Ovens, but had terminated that call before it connected, this at 17:32. The prosecution would argue that if Luke had spoken to anyone in the house at that time, he risked them hearing Ferris and Dickie on the moped, and therefore placing himself at the East House's end of the path. Furthermore, the call he did finally make would come nearly 10 minutes later, plenty time to hurry along Rowan's Dyke path and out of earshot to be spotted hiding from roadside view. Luke would also claim that it was his dog Mia that had found Jodi, as the prosecution questioned how Jodi had been found what seemed like to them very easily and in record time. Mia, Mitchell advised, was trained in tracking. However, Mitchell had nothing at the time of Jodi's to pick up a scent for the dog, and again, this explanation and legitimacy would be questioned, as Mia was also not trained as a cadaver dog. The prosecution would further dismiss the claim, as both Luke and Mia had already walked the entire length of Rowan's Dyke path, with the dog giving no signal of anything. It was only when the rest of the search party arrived that Luke claimed she signalled at the wall. The court would also hear during questioning that Luke had been able to describe what Jodi had been wearing when she was murdered. This somewhat undermined Luke saying he hadn't seen her, as not only would Jodi not be wearing the same clothes she had had on during school that day, since changing, but at midnight in the woodland, with her clothes strewn across the floor and trousers literally binding her arms, this would not be possible. Luke would go on to further incriminate himself by commenting that Jodi did not have her hair bobbling, going as far to describe its design, another point the prosecution used to poke holes in Luke's version of events. The court heard from David High that on the evening of Jodi's death, Luke was not as unkempt as he normally would be in their company, seeming somewhat cleaner than usual. The prosecution would argue this is because after calling High, Mitchell returned home to cover up any potential evidence. This would also be the reason Luke wanted to meet out with the house, and would also line up with the time that Mitchell's first garden fire was witnessed by neighbour Patricia Franklin at 6:30 p.m. They would go on to say that Luke would use High and Co as an alibi, and while he needed to be seen, he couldn't have them at the house where evidence was potentially being destroyed. This would keep him out of the way until around 10 p.m, when Luke was spotted in his street by Nicholas Franklin. Mr. Franklin also witnessed the Mitchell's second fire of the night, and believed he heard more than one voice in the garden at the time. Fellow neighbour George Ramage also witnessed this fire. Mitchell had claimed he didn't really know the area where Jodi was found that well. This seemed somewhat odd, as not only was there a tree that seemed to have both his and Jodi's initials carved into it, but Luke had drawn a detailed map during a conversation with Mitchell's police liaison officer. The liaison officer would also intercept the replacement jacket and knife's receipt after staff members at Flip had alerted them about the purchase. Corinne had originally said that the replacement knife was in fact the original missing lock knife, although the handle would not match the one described by others. Corinne also claimed it was found in a bag after a search of the property, but when shown a photo of the area in question during the search, there was no bag there. The defence had very little in terms of explanation or other possibilities. The suspected knife and jacket would be seen as evidence of absence rather than the other way around. Donald Findlay QC instead looked to throw evidence out, such as Corinne helping with the tattoo, going as far as to say the prosecution had staged an ambush to discredit Corinne and wreck her son's alibi. However, it was not the prosecution that had shown Luke's supposed alibi and Corinne's confirmation of this to be false. Findlay would use a lot of his time instead to argue his client had been treated unfairly, on one occasion spending hours showing news pieces about the case, only to be questioned as to his point by the judge himself. Luke's alibi was instead destroyed by his own brother Shane. Shane had originally given the same statement as Luke and Corinne, but would admit, however, that his mother had instructed them to tell the police that version of events. Shane would instead testify that after returning home, he checked nobody was in. As far as he was aware, upon leaving the house, Luke was not present either. Shane testified he was not at home with his mum and brother enjoying dinner, but was instead masturbating to porn on the internet. The reason he had wanted to confirm that nobody was home at the time. This left Luke missing hours out of his day, a wooden-handled jack pike knife, a green khaki jacket, and an explanation as to how he'd found a body at midnight in the woods of an unknown area with a tracking dog that had nothing to scent. A lot had also been made about Luke's very cold and almost arrogant behaviour. Luke had mocked police after they failed to stop the bins in his street being emptied, and therefore any potential evidence. Indeed, previously quoted testimony already highlights this, but even on the night of Jodi's death, Sister Jodi Jones testified that, quote, the only time Luke showed any emotion was when he was on the phone to the police and we were shouting at him. He then started to raise his voice. The judge during the proceedings also had noticed and then indeed commented on Luke's perceived lack of emotion and empathy during evidence given in court. On the 20th of February, after 9 weeks of testimony, replica walls, as well as a visit to the scene by the jury themselves, they began to deliberate their verdict. After 5 hours of deliberation, on January 21st, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. The judge would set the minimum sentencing at 20 years without parole, and commented, quote, it's very rare for a person so young to be convicted of such a serious murder. Jodi regarded you with affection and trust. She went out joyfully to meet you, and she did you no harm. Yet you inflicted a horrible death on her and mutilated her body. Lord Nimmo Smith commented he could not understand why Luke had done what he had, even going as far as to say Luke might not know himself. Smith, however, would say he couldn't simply dismiss Mitchell's fascination with Satanism as, quote, mere adolescent rebellion. Since his conviction, Mitchell has had several appeals rejected. In May 2008, February 2011, April 2011, and July 2014. Mitchell has appealed on several points, claiming a lookalike was guilty of Jodi's murder, as well as the case itself being held in Edinburgh. 2 further suspects would come to light since Mitchell's conviction, although both would be eliminated from any further inquiries by police due to a lack of evidence. James Faulkner's sperm was found in a condom some distance from Jodi's body. Faulkner had been in the wooded area another time masturbating, a very strange act, but ultimately there was no other evidence to link Faulkner to Jodi's death. Another, a local drug addict, was also cleared of any involvement. Mark Kane was highlighted by college mate Scott Forbes after Kane had met him, with scratches on his face and little memory of the day of Jodi's death. Forbes would later go on to write a book about the case. The case cast a shadow for many months in the local area. Very rarely were there such brutal killings, and for the victim and perpetrator to both be so young, it was even more impactful. This was put best by Reverend Mark Nichols the day of Jodi's funeral. Quote, on the 30th of June, evil had its way, and it left a terrible scar. Hello there, and you are there, and I am here, and this is the opinion piece, the part where we speak about the case itself and any opinions of, just so we can give our personal opinions, and that way it doesn't muddy the waters in terms of what we know and what they found. For me, look, guilty as sin. On a couple of points, there's really a few really. First off, I'll say we don't have an alibi. Where's your alibi? We're missing quite a few hours in the afternoon, and it looks like an hour a night as well, between 9 and 10, given David High's testimony and the other boy's testimony to say they left him at 9. So we're missing, well, close to, I think it's if we do maths, what are we talking? 950. I can't even do maths. I really can't do maths. We put me on the spot like that, and there we go. But roughly just under 3 hours, essentially. He's missing. However, that's not the only big flag. The other flag as well is the missing knife. We know that he had the knife. David High tells us he had it on the night. So where did that go? That's one big thing. Another massive flag in terms of that is trying to replace that knife then. Denying it exists, then trying to replace it. And it just vanishing in the first place. But keeping the pouch, that's a strange one. That seems almost trophy-like. Much like the tattoo, that seems trophy-like as well, which, again, you can't really get inside the mind of anybody like that, but definitely it would follow certain patterns. But again, that's cliche, so we're not really sure. Too much TV. His attitude is strange. I got a chance to speak to a couple of people who attended court, a couple of people who work within Flip, and a gentleman now, he was a kid then, that went to Cadets Willock with a kind of hindsight anecdotal story about what he believed was quite a psychotic kid at the time, having to put him in I'm not military based, I don't really know military, but essentially a brig, so to speak. This gentleman and somebody else having to put Luke in it for some misdemeanor. But the guy, I know, he's always been big. He's 6'2", 6'3". He actually said that he felt uneasy around Luke when asked to do that. So that does speak volumes as far as I'm concerned. He's a very confident person, I think is the best way to put it, in terms of that. Other flags as well, of course. I keep coming back to the lack of. I mean, the green khaki jacket, saying that doesn't exist, and then we find out there's plenty of evidence to the contrary that it did exist. And then prior to that, after the fact, people then muddying the waters even more with certain facts now. But I'm sure we'll get into that anyway. Actually, we do have to cover certain things in this opinion. But for me, as I say, guilty. Very, very guilty. And lucky that we're able to put him away in the respect that I think he would have done it again. I really do. It just seems he has a history of violence, and I think there was perhaps maybe the month beforehand when he had left Cadets, and he did speak of the fact that Cadets was one of the things that kept him sane to a certain degree. I think maybe that was the final straw. That, and again, this is just my opinion, that and perhaps maybe an argument with Jodi about Kimberly, perhaps, something along those lines. But at the end of the day, it did seem like he kind of had a couple of things fall down around him at the time. But as I say, for me, absolutely guilty. I don't have any doubt in my mind in terms of the other suspects as well. And don't get me wrong, James Falk was a very strange one, because who goes to the woods for a posh wank? That is very strange. People aren't aware posh wank is the term for masturbating into a condom. Just save mess? I don't know. No idea. But anyway, one of those. That is a very posh wank in general is strange, but to go to the woods to do it, that's just weird. The other guy, I don't hold much weight in that, but I will get into that actually, because I do need to cover something in terms of that. Now that I think I'll look at my notes here. So, yeah, as I say, guilty as sin. Obviously, there is question marks over his guilt after the fact. I think we should really address that, because I imagine quite a lot of people would come to this video to hear about that, to be fair, so I better cover that. First off, I want to say that the whole thing around this case is crazy. Looking, online, on social media and everything else, people go rabid for this. I mean, it's a very passionate people on both sides. Yeah, if that's the way you want to busy your time, then fair enough. But all accusing each other of being different people, you might want to just chat about the case instead of trying to become detectives. However, the actual case itself and the people that are leading the movement in terms of Luke's innocence, that's actually the person I mentioned in the video. It's Scott Forbes, an author, and another author and criminologist, Dr. Sandra Lean. During doing the things for these videos, obviously, I've had to look into a lot of stuff. Very limited in terms of Scottish news reports. I was able to, all the quotes taken were all taken from 2 different independent sources, just to make sure they were done verbatim and done in the right context. But it is very limited in terms of what you can look at. But I was able to have a look through certain things. I don't own Mr. Forbes or any of Mrs. Lean's books. However, as I say, I was able to scan through a couple of things, get a couple of things online in terms of what the content was. Didn't agree with a lot of it, in all honesty, from a personal and a scientific kind of view. So maybe best covering some of that actually. Really looking at it, I mean, for instance, let's start with Sandra Lean. Yeah, so right, so right away actually, let me just say right off the bat as a disclaimer, I don't know these people, no personal experience of them, and I've not had any dealings with them, so anything I see is anecdotal at the end of the day. I will be using that word a lot, anecdotal, because you really have to in this respect. It's a sensitive thing to talk about, and you can only go off your experience. Unfortunately, none of us were there to say for definite, things. So it's all opinion. And that's kind of what I'd say with those guys as well. I hate using the word liar as such. I'd prefer, misinformed or a falsehood. I like to try and think that people do things for the right reasons. But just in terms of Ms. Lean, we look at a couple of things really. One, the DNA thing always comes up. There's always a lot made over DNA. Luke not having DNA. There's no DNA. Craig Dobby did say there was all the DNA found on Jodi belonged to people she knew, including Luke. Now that's a big 2 words there, including Luke. So even the police state that he has his DNA on Jodi, and that's to be expected. DNA is what DNA is. It can be transferred through traces. As I say, they had a sexual relationship, so you expect it. But any other DNA found on her, as I say, that doesn't prove anything in terms of, the actual killing itself. It just proves that there was some DNA on her. Again, people do get hung up on that, and I do think it is, again, same with myself, too much TV. We watch these programs where you get a little montage, someone spins some things in test tubes, and Robert's your father's brother, we have a killer. That's not how things work in real life, and I think that really does set people's standards a little bit in the wrong direction. But to kind of go a little further on the DNA, one thing that I did find is there's a lot of kind of messing of science, confusing the numbers, facts and figures. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is there's 3 suspects out with Luke. We have, and this is in terms of Luke's defence team, we have James Falconer with the condom, which again dismissed, but very little information on that. Mark Kane, who was highlighted by his friend Scott, that again we dismissed that because there's no, there is no DNA. So if we really want to hammer through on the DNA, there's none of him. So that's a strange one. But anyway, what the other one is Joseph Jones. That's been quite a big kind of one. I'm sure there's somebody in the comments talking about it. Thanks for the interaction. Consider a subscriber and liking. I'm not arguing with you though. As I say, the one thing that we have to look at is when we look at DNA, you not only look at markers. Markers are telling you, in terms of height, weight, hair colour, all these different things. But your DNA itself is made up of what we call centimorgans. I don't know how au fait you are when it comes to these things, but centimorgans, essentially, you have about 7,400 roughly within your body, half of which would come from your mum and half of which would come to your dad. So you talk about, as I say, 3,400 odd centimorgans from each parent. Now, when you look at it from that sense, that means that the DNA itself would be, if it was Joseph, it would be 50% the same as Jodi, because they would both get the same amount from their parent. There or thereabouts, you're talking 50% match with your brother and sister, immediate sibling through centimorgans. You're probably going to have anything in the region between 2,200 odd, there or thereabouts, to about 3,400, as I say, half 50% of your DNA would match with your sibling, and from then on and so forth, there's a dilution in terms of, you know, first cousin, removed, all that kind of thing. So that's a big kind of one there for me, because that doesn't follow how that works. So you can't really, for me, you can't be confused by Joseph and Luke's DNA unless the 50%, it's 50% of the DNA that's missing, and that 50% happens to be all the 50% that Joseph shares in common with Jodi, which that's some probability there. But again, that's not for me. That doesn't match up. That doesn't go. A lot of quotes and stuff get mixed. I don't know if it's actually misleading or followers, for want of a better word. That sounds a bit derogatory. But people that, you know, comment, should we say, the one with the Gran Alice Walker, in terms of she had actually said to Jean, sorry, it was a mess. This has now been changed to she was stomping backwards and forwards through the crime scene, repeating, "It's all a mess, it's all a mess, it's all a mess, it's all a mess." No, that didn't happen. And she actually does quote that, "It's a mess," and then it changes. So that's strange. That's something I'll bring up again, actually, things changing. I'll bring that up again. Can you stick a pin in that? As well, I would say, with Miss Lean, there is a pretty poor track record in terms of looking at the things that she's highlighted in her book. Two gentlemen that I know of have admitted guilt after the fact, one of them taking his own life. So putting faith in someone who has such what looks like a bad judge of character, or looking at the evidence itself, for these people to then come out and say, "No, absolutely, I did do it," and for everybody to suspect it, you know, beforehand, and for her to argue the case in between, it's not a very strong look, in my opinion, when you're supposed to be a criminologist. Again, this is personal. At the end of the day, everyone can agree with who they agree with. That's it. Everyone likes every different type of ice cream. You don't like chocolate, there's vanilla. You don't like vanilla, there's strawberry. You don't like strawberry, there's a door. But as I say, in terms of the track record, we've got two confirmed, you know, confessions, and well, let's say take a look. So, for example, you were to give me 3 tips for the horses one day, and tenner on the first horse. It pulls up towards the end, I lose my tenner. Second horse, I think, well, I've lost a tenner, I'll put 20 quid on it, try and make my money back. This horse pulls up, chucks the jockey off, and then proceeds to shoot the jockey in the face. I don't think I'm putting money on the third horse. Call me negative, but that's the way I work. As I say though, it's for me, there's not a lot of stuff I can find there that I agree with. I will be honest though, Ms. Lean does have a lot of podcasts, so there may be something in there. I couldn't go back and listen to them all. I've listened to so many of them, and quite a lot it's the same points, so I don't want to just go over years of it, because she has been doing it for a while. Give her that. She's been really at it for quite a while, so there's a lot there. I probably think some people might binge that stuff if they're that way inclined, but not for me. As I say, science doesn't back up what's been said, so again, that's Sandra. But in terms of Mr. Forbes, I think we should talk maybe a little about Mr. Forbes as well. He's a very interesting character, I think, is the most polite way I can put it. I've saw quite a lot of his behaviour online through the YouTube podcasts and things like that. I'm not too into social media, but I have seen, as I say, bits of that, but I'm not really across that, so I can't comment. But I do notice a couple of things on YouTube in terms of his behaviour, which I found strange. I was actually going to go back and maybe take some examples, because I hate to make accusations without the proof there to back it up. But in all honesty, I did go back in to try and find some of the things that I saw him comment on, and they weren't there. I don't know if that was himself that deleted it, or maybe the the channel itself. I know some people do police their comment section. I don't, by the way, so please feel free to shout at each other in the comment section. Interaction's fantastic. I won't be shouting back at you, but bash on. So as I say, for me, that is one, but his behaviour is strange, and I do think if you're supposed to be a representative for someone legally, it's a very strange way to act. But again, maybe that's him in normal life. I don't know the guy. Maybe he's just naturally aggressive and argumentative. Some would say passionate. I would say there's a thin line between passion and just maliciousness, really, to be honest. But that's just me. I've seen him, as I say, I was wanting to go back and catch some of them. I've seen him accuse a couple of people of being different people from the family. A crooked cop who something about fraudulent cop. Couple of things like that, really strange. But as I say, they're all deleted, which is even weirder. Hopefully that's the channel. It's not him, because that's an even stranger behaviour to go back and then try and get rid of. Well, what essentially is you, really. That's, if you want to promote it first time round, then stick with it. Have the courage to do that. But again, that's not me. I'm just anecdotally, I'm just judging someone personally, and that's what this part is. As I say, this is my opinion and opinion only. But with the deal in regards to Mr. Forbes and some of the claims that he's made, the 6 pints of blood that Jodi lost, I've seen this in so many videos, and I've seen it quoted by lots of people, and I'll be honest, I even saw it in a rap song, believe it or not. There's not 6 pints of blood in a human body. The average fully grown adult has between 4.5 to 5.5 pints of blood. So a 14-year-old girl doesn't have 6 pints of blood. That might seem really pernickety, but it's such a small fact for it's such a big thing to make a claim that someone has lost more blood than is in their body. It's so hyperbolic, and you have to wonder why they have to get into hyperbole in that sense. And I would say the same with the drugs and Joseph Jones. One podcast I watched then is marijuana smoking reacts with the drugs. The other podcast I watch, he's off the drugs, and the reaction's actually just him smoking. Makes him paranoid. Weed makes everybody paranoid. That's why they call it para. That's like just me being pernickety. But that changes. There's a lot of stories that change, little bits that get added on. Things like that. One of the new ones that I noticed was to represent two policemen in Dalkeith, Alan and James Jones. One of the latest podcasts, they were related to the Jones family. From the people that I've managed to speak to, and from what I can gather, getting a rough idea of the family tree in a sense, that's nonsense. That's not true at all. There is no other James other than Jodi's dad, in the family itself. That I can see, there's no Alan whatsoever. That I can see, does seem to be one, but it does seem to be a different surname, and married into the family. So that's nonsense, not true. I don't know why you'd lie about that, because the one weird thing is that's a new one. So it's like you need to add on a little, I don't know what the word is, like a accent colour, like and boom, there's a little flash of red there. That looks beautiful. So that's lies. Well, I just hate lies. Sorry, I hate that word. I don't know where he got his information from, but it's not true. It's not true at all. He might be getting a bad advice. He might be making things up. I don't know. I can only speculate. The other thing I would say is a lot of the stories that Scott Forbes does tell, essentially we can find that from roughly round about the time the whole case kicking off, but in looks form. So if you take a story in terms of say Jodi's behaviour, I can find you 2-3 stories where that's actually Corinne. So again, this projection thing, very strange. But one that stuck out as well, and I saw a lot of people actually call him out on this online, be honest, a lot of people did call him out, was Jodi finding her dad's body after his suicide. I did say at the start of this, she was on holiday, I believe in Bulgaria, with aunties and cousins. So she wasn't in the house. Now, in the book, he does tell a story about how the night before she had took a bottle of vodka at an adult party, and that was believed to be the reason why, you know, Jimmy might have took his own life, because of the whole kind of devolving family kind of relationship and the whole situation they were in. So Joseph then had a beef, so to speak, with Jodi for her being the reason that, you know, Jimmy killed himself. Problem is, Jodi wasn't there. So the vodka story, stealing a bottle of vodka, it's not true. It's not true at all. I can definitely confirm that. It's not true. So that's two, that in my limited research with what, you know, limited kind of people I know from the area and what I can gather, those two are absolute nonsense. And between that and the online behaviour, I'll be honest, if I was to see my opinion, this guy, no, absolutely not. It does turn out as well, I did see a story, maybe I'm being tainted by this, but I did see a story where apparently he tried to sell his story and Mark Cain's story to the papers for £50,000. Again, I found that in a different couple of sources, but that for me was about one where I thought, I'm not really sure about this. And the more and more I looked into his claims as well, it just poppycocks, I think, is the nicest word I can put it, and honestly, that's what my gran used to say. The only other thing I would say is there was a documentary put on Channel 5, Murder in a Small Town, that actually had Scott Forbes in it. He did, at the time, he made no effort to, you know, kind of identify himself as a representative of Luke or anything like that. He just kind of explained about his mate Mark Cain. They said about how he was a bit suspicious. Everyone kind of thought, that's brilliant, could we maybe speak to him? And then we got informed that he was dead, which you would have thought they kind of said before they started the chat. Sorry for wasting your time coming here, lads, but the boy's dead. Very strange behaviour. But as I say, he never really said he was a lawyer then. He doesn't say he's a lawyer now. He kind of does. He says he's an investigative lawyer, a detective lawyer, or not a solicitor. He's no legal representative. I don't know. Honestly, it's kind of like, you know that story when someone said, I've got a girlfriend but she stays up by my gran's, you wouldn't know her. It's all a lot of that. So, but again, that's just the experience I have. There's people that are at him every day and he's probably back and forwards with them, so probably got a lot more experience than me. Anecdotally, that's what I see. If you've got any comments, stick them in there down below. Go on. Wee bit of interaction helps. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up in the video, even if it's sarcastic. Even if you think, yeah, thumbs up, well done, mate. Helps the interaction. Honestly, do it sarcastically. I'll know. I'll go, it's sarcastic. Yeah. Give me a thumbs up. Anyway, no, as I say, if you guys want to talk, and I'll probably recognise a couple of names because I have seen a lot of podcasts, and there is, I don't want to name them just in case they don't turn up, because then I'll feel let down. But there are a couple of names that I did see, and yeah, you guys are passionate. But I've no interaction with these guys. As I say, I'm not somebody that deals with toxic kind of online stuff. I'm trying to avoid as much arguments as I can. So yeah, you guys are more than entitled to do that, and please consider giving this a like and whatnot. But regardless, we're not finished talking about the case. That's, as I say, for Scott Forbes and Sandra Lane, I don't hold much weight in what they say. I do believe there's a whole other bunch of questions to be asked in terms of the whole movement and what they do, but that's not what this podcast is about. That's for somebody else with more time on their hands and more energy to deal with all the all the stuff that comes with that. But yeah, that's for me, no, absolutely not. So the claims in terms of new DNA, it's only coming from that camp, and I know without beyond a shadow of a doubt that I've proved there's mistruths across the board. So I can't believe them. If I can't believe them on the small things, I can't believe them on the big things. I have to go with what they found, and my gut tells me Luke's guilty. So let's get back to Luke rather than talking about the legal team. So yeah, guilty as sin. Really, when you look at it, as I say, we go back to the lack of, and it's not a lack of evidence. It's the evidence of absence. It's not there. We know that the knife should be there. We know the jacket should be there. We have, CCTV. We have proof. We have his mum trying to replace them, and we can't forget that. That was trying to be replaced. There was lots of different. It wasn't there, they didn't exist, now they did exist, but they're missing, but oh no, I've found them, and it's just deeply, deeply suspicious behaviour. And I think if you ignore that, then absolutely, then everything else might make sense. But really, we don't have an alibi. Shane's testimony is really, as I say, the final nail in the coffin in terms of that, not be able to place Luke in the house when he left the house. And so adamant that they were all having dinner. It's a strange one. Now, in terms of the garden fires as well, Luke was the one that really did actually admit that in police question as well. He did admit to it. And in appeals, of course, we do see that as well in appeal records online. He was the one that admitted his brother and sister may have been having fires that night. Corinne then changed the story to pampas grass. Going back a point, actually, that does Mr. Forbes. There was this kind of I don't know what the accusation that the Jones family were kind of a bit eyes wide shut, really, a bit of swingers and whatnot. Find it ironic because pampas grass, it turns out, I didn't know what it is. I'm not a green fingered at all, but pampas grass is used in the swingers circles to show that you're up for a wee bit of the how's your wife, or who's your wife? Introduce me to your wife. I don't know. That's a game. I don't even drive, so I'm not putting my keys in my bowl. Sorry, totally off point. But yeah, the fires. That's one thing for me. And as I say, another thing that I don't think people look into a lot or really kind of comment on is the fact that he sat at the end of that path for so long. Jodi was supposed to meet him at her end, and he knows this. But not only that, it's very strange behaviour. You leave the house at 20 to 6, and you're going to stand there for 50 minutes and wait for somebody to meet you to walk along a 10-minute road. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have the patience to do that. I would give it 10, 15 minutes maybe if I hadn't started walking already, and then I would walk up, because I'm going to try and walk up and see if I can get them at the door. I'm going to meet them at that end anyway. There's probably stuff to do up there. It's that I don't believe for a second that he sat at the end of that path for 50 minutes. Nobody has that amount of patience, especially when you want to get on with your day. We know he wanted to get on the day because he then made plans, made 2 quick calls, and he was gone. So he obviously wanted to do something with his time. He wasn't standing waiting for 50 minutes, hiding from everybody. No, I think he was waiting for his mum to get home. I think that's what it was. And he didn't want to be seen. But at the end of the day, to think for a second that somebody would sit there for nearly an hour when they're quick, rapid, making 2 phone calls in the space of 30 minutes to make sure the plan's organised, no, not for me. The finding the body as well, let's be honest, it's not Lassie, it's not the littlest hobo, Skippy the bush kangaroo or anything like that. We do not have a trained dog with a scent to find a body in a darkened woods at midnight with a 15-year-old boy. Come on now. In terms of science, when it comes to the 6 pints of blood and the DNA, this is just ridiculously silly. There's no way. I know a lot of people want to put a lot of faith in German Shepherds. I've had 2 or 3 German Shepherds in my time, and they're brilliant dogs. They're intelligent dogs. They're also stupid dogs. But to have this idea that we can walk past the wall, and then on the way back the dog senses something. Now, how does that work? If it's a gifted dog, why is it not finding Jodi the first time? Why does it need an audience? That is a strange story, and for me, for want of a better word, it's bollocks. No, Luke knew where she was, and he hopped over that wall and tried to make it look like he'd found something. No, it doesn't work. The whole behaviour of his arrogance, essentially, real arrogance, and thinking he can get away with that. Some of the conversations he had with the police, using derogatory words for people with mental illnesses, all those things. Don't get me wrong, the police interviews were a little bit much as well. The police definitely tried to, good cop, bad cop, but it was just bad cop, really. But look, Giv's quite as good as he gets there. As I say though, it has to be guilty for me. Absolutely 100%. He butchered that young girl. For what reason I don't know, but we really do. The Black Dahlia stuff, there is a lot of similar injuries. The cheek injury, especially the forehead injury, the eye. There's a lot that are. I know there's a lot of injuries, but there's some very specific, calculated, and precise injuries that are not only similar, they are the same. That's so. She wasn't cut in half, but who's to say, that he wouldn't have tried that if he'd had the opportunity. But no, there's definite similarities there. He had downloaded these things, he was familiar with these things, and I think he tried to reenact it. I really do. I think he saw an opportunity to do something that he thought was a bit epic, so to speak, make him evil and cool, but no, it doesn't work. The boy is where he deserves to be, in my opinion, and if he doesn't admit guilt, obviously he'll stay there, which I agree with as well. I think, really, in all honesty, he took a girl's life at the age of 14. She had no chance to grow up, finish school, have kids, be an auntie, maybe, be a granny. So no, I think he deserves a lot longer. Really, just no, absolutely. Certain people, I think, maybe him included, just put them in a room at the bottom of the jail, shut the door, and walk away. Simple as that. If I know it sounds a bit extreme, and I'm not that way inclined, but if a dog bites a kid, then it happens to the dog. So that's the kind of be all and end all. That I think guilty has to be the verdict here for me as well. There's no rehabilitation looking like, because of things that you read after the fact, looking for satanic books in prison and things like that. The whole idea that he's still, I am innocent, it shows that level of arrogance for me, that this will always be the case, and he'll always feel on top, a wee bit better than everyone else. I do think that there's a good chance that he might get out in a relatively soon time. He'll be not a young man, but definitely not decrepit in any way. And I do think, again, there's a chance that something might happen again. Simple as that. Just my opinion. I hope it's not true. I'd hate to predict something like that and put it out the universe and for it to happen. But no, the guy no, definitely, for me, guilty. As I say, there's a lot of other things we need to look at, and everyone has their opinions. So feel free to share them. And if there's anything else that I've missed that you think I should, have put in here, then please put it below. What I will say is, though, I have covered the Scott Forbes and Sandra Lean things. I have explained why these aren't in the video. So, shout at me if you want. I'm not shouting back. Feel free to tweet your outrage to the billionaire with the emerald mine. And thanks for listening. Thanks for getting this far as well, obviously. I know it's a very long video. Didn't expect it to go this long. We will have some new stuff coming up. I'll have a preview for the newest video in the next couple of days, and then that'll go up a couple of weeks after that. I'll leave that as a wee teaser there. It's a celebrity case this time round. We're trying something a bit different. Obviously, I can get a little bit more information, which is perfect, because trying to get information on this is like pulling blood from a stone. As I say, there are loads of things that I've missed here, so I might put a couple of things in the comments in terms of my opinions or things that I have missed and pin them to the top. I'm sure by the time I've finished recording this, I would have thought of 2 or 3 other points that I wanted to make that I didn't. Should have probably wrote it down, But thank you again for listening. Please consider subscribing and liking this video, even if it is sarcastically. Like I say, I'll understand, I'll know, I'll be like, I know that's a sarcastic one. that guy left me a horrible comment. Have a lovely day. But in all honesty, as I say, consider any kind of interaction, even if you want to give me a thumbs down, that's interaction as well. Did you know that? That helps the video as well. Huh. You thought you were punishing people, and you're not. Anyway, it's been a blast and a good time doing this, and a slog doing this as well at the same time. If you do have any questions, I will try and answer them in the comments below, but as I say, I don't have a chance to get to absolutely everything, and there's probably certain things that I won't want to get to at all. So thank you for being there. I have been here. This has been the opinion piece, and thanks again for your time. Enjoy the rest of, well, your day, innit? Bye.